My wife once said to me, "I'm having surgery to stay childless always." I answered simply, "Your decision." Then I divorced her and married her best friend. The pregnancy news at Easter crushed her. Looking back, I should have seen the signs during our 3 years of marriage. But Miranda had always been good at presenting herself as the woman I thought I'd fallen in love with. I'm Jake, 32, an engineering consultant specializing in sustainable building design here in Denver. Miranda was finishing her medical residency at Presbyterian St. Joseph, and together we built what I thought was a solid foundation for our future. We had talked about children extensively during our engagement. She said she wanted 2, maybe 3 kids, and we'd agreed to start trying after she finished residency, and we'd paid off her medical school loans. Everything was planned, methodical, the way I approach most things in life. That's probably why what happened at our anniversary dinner hit me like a freight train I never saw coming. We were at Garden and Grace, an upscale steakhouse downtown that Miranda loved. It made her feel important when colleagues saw her there. I had made reservations weeks in advance and even arranged for champagne to celebrate 3 years of what I thought was marital bliss. The conversation started normally enough. Her residency stress, my latest project designing an eco-friendly housing development in Boulder, our upcoming vacation to Aspen. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, she dropped the bomb that ended our marriage. "I've been thinking about our future," she said, eyes fixed not on me, but on her barely touched salmon like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I've scheduled a consultation for a hysterectomy." I set down my fork, certain I'd misheard. "What now?" "A hysterectomy. I want to make sure I never have children. Ever." Her voice was casual, as if she were talking about changing our cable package. "I've realized motherhood isn't for me," she continued, "and I don't want to spend the next decade worrying about birth control failures or feeling pressured to reproduce just because that's what married couples do." The restaurant noise faded into background static as I processed what she had just said. 3 years of marriage. 5 years together. Countless conversations about baby names and school districts. And here she was, telling me she wanted surgical sterilization to make sure the family we had planned would never exist. "When did you decide this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Over the past few months, I've been seeing a therapist, working through my feelings about parenthood. I realized I only said I wanted kids because that's what you wanted to hear." Finally, she looked at me, her expression defiant. "I'm not going to sacrifice my body and career for hypothetical children I don't actually want." I nodded slowly and took a sip of champagne that suddenly tasted like vinegar. "Your body, your choice." She blinked, surprised by my calmness. "That's it? You're not going to try to change my mind?" "Nope. If that's what you've decided, then that's what you've decided." I signaled for the check. "But you should know this marriage was built on the idea that we were building a family together." "If that's off the table, we need to talk about what that means for us." Confusion replaced the certainty in her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I married you because I thought we wanted the same things. If we don't, then maybe we're not as compatible as we thought." The check arrived. I paid it without looking at the total. Walking to the parking garage, Miranda stayed unusually quiet. At home, she went straight to the bedroom while I sat in my office, staring at my drafting table, the same one where I'd been sketching plans to convert the spare bedroom into a nursery. At 6 a.m. the next morning, while Miranda headed into another 12-hour hospital shift, I called my brother Dave, a divorce attorney in Denver. "I need to dissolve my marriage immediately." "Jesus, Jake, what happened?" Long story short, Miranda doesn't want children. She waited until our anniversary dinner to announce it. 5 years together, and apparently she lied about wanting a family the entire time. Dave was quiet. "That's irreconcilable differences." "Definitely qualifies. Colorado is no fault, so the process should be straightforward, if you're both reasonable." I doubt she'll be reasonable about anything. And I was right. By 9 a.m. I'd emptied our joint investment accounts. That money came primarily from my inheritance, from selling my late father's construction business after he passed 2 years earlier. I had poured that money into our future. By noon, I had loaded my truck with my engineering equipment, my tools, and everything that was solely mine. I left divorce papers on the kitchen island next to the keys for the mountain cabin in Breckenridge, the one we bought for family vacations, for teaching our kids to ski. The house felt hollow with half the furniture gone. But I wasn't being vindictive. I only took what I had brought into the marriage or bought with my own money. I left a note I'd rewritten 3 times, trying to find the right tone. Miranda, your decision to get a hysterectomy without discussing it with your husband was absolutely your right. Your body, your choice always. But staying in this marriage was my choice, and I'm choosing not to. The papers are self-explanatory. I'll be in touch through my attorney. When Miranda came home that evening, exhausted, she found the house quiet and half empty. I was already across town in a hotel room, having dinner with Dave and planning my next move. The divorce proceedings turned into a battlefield quicker than I expected. Miranda's transformation from the woman I married into someone I barely recognized was both shocking and eye-opening. Her lawyer, a shark named Patricia Hendress, known for bleeding men dry during divorces, immediately demanded spousal support. Claiming Miranda's residency salary of $55,000 couldn't sustain the lifestyle my $180,000 consulting income had provided. The fight over the Denver townhouse was tough, but the worst was her demand for my custom workshop in the garage, the place where I built furniture and dreamed about teaching woodworking to my kids. It wasn't about money. She wanted to destroy the space where I had imagined passing down skills to the next generation. She's targeting everything tied to your dream of fatherhood, Dave told me. The cabin, the workshop, even the rocking chair you started making. She wants it all. Miranda's family rallied behind her. Weekly dinners turned into therapy sessions where they dissected my midlife crisis like I was some case study. Her professor parents at CU treated our divorce as an academic exercise in masculine fragility. Her brother Marcus, a law student, filled his social media with posts about men who bail when women assert autonomy. They painted Miranda as a feminist hero, even though she'd lied about wanting children for 5 years and unilaterally rewrote the terms of our marriage. But the most unexpected twist came from Harper, Miranda's best friend since college. She reached out with a text. "Jake, I know this is probably weird, but I think Miranda handled this terribly. I'm sorry you're going through it. Harper and I had always been polite but distant. She was Miranda's friend, not mine. A freelance photographer, creative and artistic, she balanced Miranda's scientific mindset. I never thought much of her beyond small talk at social events. But her message opened a door I hadn't expected. We met at Krama Coffee House in Rhino, neutral territory far from Miranda's hospital crowd. Harper looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her camera strap. I told Miranda months ago she needed to be honest with you, Harper whispered. Her therapist convinced her that wanting kids was patriarchal pressure, and she absorbed it. Instead of being honest, she decided blindsiding you was easier. She actually told you she was going to blindside me? I asked. Harper nodded. She said if you accepted her decision, it meant you truly loved her. If you left, it meant you only saw her as a breeding machine. Either way, she thought it would be decisive. Harper looked at me with genuine sadness. I told her it was cruel, that marriages need discussion and compromise. But she said I didn't understand because I'd never been married. I learned Miranda had been testing me, making comments about child-free friends, bringing up articles about women who regretted motherhood, watching how I reacted. It was all a psychological experiment, and I was the subject. She thought you'd beg her to reconsider, Harper continued. When you just accepted it and left, it shattered her. She calls me every night crying that you abandoned her instead of fighting for your marriage. Fighting for a marriage she'd already ended, I said flatly. Exactly, but she won't see it that way. Miranda always rewrites history to make herself the victim. As Harper and I talked, I realized she understood the situation better than anyone in Miranda's circle. She'd seen our marriage from the outside, spotted cracks I had missed, and recognized manipulation I had been too close to see. More than that, Harper was the first person who didn't tell me I was overreacting or that I should have tried harder to save something already dead. What began as coffee meetings about Miranda's behavior turned into a genuine friendship. We met at different coffee shops across Denver, at first united by concern for Miranda, but soon discovering we had far more in common than I ever expected. Harper loved hiking Colorados. Climbing 14ers had always seemed like pointless suffering to Miranda, but when I mentioned my goal of completing all 58 peaks before turning 40, Harper's eyes lit up. That was the first time I realized how different the two of them really were. We also discovered we shared a love for vintage film photography. Harper still shot with her grandfather's old Leica, and she had a fascination with sustainable architecture from an artistic perspective. I always felt like an outsider when I was around you and Miranda, Harper admitted one day while we walked through Washington Park. She'd talk about your relationship, like she was performing in a play, like she was acting the part of the devoted wife who wanted the white picket fence and babies, but it never felt real. Her observation hit me like a hammer. It explained so much of what I had rationalized away for years. Miranda's enthusiasm for house hunting had always felt forced. Her interest in baby names had seemed more academic than heartfelt. Even her excitement about buying a mountain cabin had been more about posting Instagram pictures than creating real family memories. "You sensed she was performing?" I asked. "From the beginning," Harper said. "Miranda's always been competitive about having the most impressive life, and you represented the stable, successful future she thought she wanted. But I could tell she was trying to convince herself as much as everyone else." Harper kicked at fallen leaves on the path as she continued. "She used to complain about feeling trapped by expectations, but then she'd post these perfect couple photos with captions about being blessed and finding her soulmate." Our conversation shifted from analyzing Miranda to discovering ourselves. Harper told me about the struggles of building her freelance photography business, her dream of shooting for National Geographic, and the complicated relationship she had with her artistic family, who thought she should have gone to art school instead of teaching herself. I opened up in ways I never had with Miranda. I shared my guilt about selling my father's construction business instead of continuing his legacy, my fear that I was so focused on planning the future, I was forgetting how to live in the moment, my growing sense that I'd been sleepwalking through life. "Miranda used to say you were obsessed with the future," Harper said during a hike up Mount Cenis. "But I think you were just trying to build something meaningful with someone who didn't actually want to build anything." Things escalated when Miranda discovered our friendship through Harper's Instagram stories. Just innocent shots of trails and coffee shops that happened to include me. Suddenly, Miranda launched a campaign to turn our friends against us. People I'd known for years started asking if I was rebounding with her best friend or if Harper had been waiting in the wings during my marriage. Miranda spread her version of events strategically through her medical colleagues, college friends, and neighbors, painting me as the man who abandoned her during her time of personal growth and immediately started an affair with her closest friend. Harper bore the brunt of it. Miranda called her late at night, accusing her of being a manipulative homewrecker plotting to steal me from the beginning. "She's telling people I only gave you advice about divorce because I wanted you for myself," Harper said, her voice shaking with anger. "Like I somehow orchestrated your entire marriage falling apart so I could swoop in." The accusations were absurd, but they stuck with some people. Miranda's sorority sisters, med school classmates, and even our neighborhood friends began treating us like pariahs. Dinner invitations dried up. Group chats went silent. Friendships of years evaporated under Miranda's narrative. But instead of driving us apart, it brought Harper and me closer. We leaned on each other while our social circle imploded. Harper's loyalty impressed me more than any grand gesture ever could. She could have distanced herself to protect her reputation, but instead she defended both of us. "I've known Miranda for 12 years, Harper said one night, after Miranda convinced her photography mentor to drop her from an exhibition. "But I've never seen her be deliberately cruel like this. It's like she's become someone else." What Harper didn't know was that Miranda's behavior was about to get much worse, and our friendship was about to evolve into something Miranda's lies had already predicted. It happened on a 3-day backpacking trip in the Indian Peaks wilderness. A sudden thunderstorm forced us to shelter in Harper's small tent. We'd been friends for months, but something about that moment, the intimacy of the rain, the closeness, whispering in the dark, shifted everything. "I need to tell you something," Harper said softly. "I think I'm falling in love with you." I'd been wrestling with the same feelings, convincing myself it was rebound emotion or gratitude. But hearing her say it shattered that lie. "I love you too," I whispered, and kissing her felt like the most natural thing in the world. We decided to keep our relationship secret until my divorce was finalized. Miranda would have used any proof of romance to weaponize the proceedings. Beyond that, we wanted something pure and untouched by the toxicity around us. 6 months later, once my divorce was final, I proposed to Harper during a sunrise hike up Mount Elbert, Colorado's highest peak. She said yes before I could finish asking. A week later, we eloped at Garden of the Gods, just Harper, me, and her colleague Maria as our witness. It was everything my first wedding hadn't been: intimate, genuine, real. Harper wore a simple white dress from a vintage shop. I wore the same suit from my first wedding, but for the first time it felt right. We exchanged vows about honesty and shared dreams instead of public performance. When Harper moved into my condo in Boulder, we turned the spare bedroom into a joint studio, photography for her, woodworking for me. Our work started blending. Her photos incorporated architectural elements from my projects. She loved watching me work with my hands, and I loved how deeply she cared about creating art. We talked about family almost immediately. Harper was excited about having kids, and for the first time I felt understood. "I want to document everything," she said one night, her hand on her still flat stomach. "The pregnancy, the birth, watching them grow. I want them to have this visual history forever." I was in the workshop, building a crib with tools my father had passed down, when Harper told me she was pregnant, with twins. Not long after, Harper's grandmother, Eleanor Chen, hosted her annual Easter brunch at her Victorian house in Colorado Springs. Eleanor was 83, a retired family court judge, and she'd taken an immediate liking to me the first time we met. Harper spent weeks putting together a photo album to announce our news, images of our elopement, shots of our home and studio, and finally, the ultrasound pictures. We didn't expect Miranda to be there. But Jessica, Harper's old college roommate, had invited her as a +1, unaware of the ongoing drama. And that brunch would become the setting for the most explosive confrontation I had ever witnessed. Jessica had been abroad during most of the divorce proceedings, so she was genuinely oblivious to the warfare Miranda had been waging against Harper and me through social media and mutual friends. "I brought Miranda because she seemed so lonely," Jessica whispered to Harper when they arrived. "She's been having such a hard time since the divorce, and I thought being around family friends might cheer her up." Miranda looked terrible. She'd lost a significant amount of weight, her hair was lank and unwashed, and she had that hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping. It was obvious she'd been struggling since the divorce finalized, and for a brief moment, I actually felt sympathy for her pain. But that sympathy evaporated the second she noticed me sitting next to Harper at the dining table, wearing a wedding ring she hadn't seen before. The Easter brunch carried on normally for about an hour. Eleanor kept everyone entertained with stories from her decades on the family court bench. Harper's teenage cousins were busy showing off their latest TikTok videos. Harper and I were waiting for just the right moment to make our announcement when Eleanor stood, clinking her wine glass with the authority of someone used to commanding a courtroom. "Harper has something special to share with all of us," she announced. "But first, I want to say how proud I am of the woman she's become, and how happy I am that she's found someone who truly appreciates her remarkable heart." Harper stood, her hands trembling slightly as she held the custom photo album she'd spent weeks creating. "Jake and I wanted to share some news with everyone," she began, opening to the first page of our elopement ceremony. "We got married 3 months ago in a small ceremony." She flipped to the ultrasound photographs, her voice growing stronger with excitement. "And we're expecting twins this fall." The room erupted. Family members rushed to offer hugs and examine the photographs. Eleanor wiped tears of joy. Harper's cousins shrieked about becoming aunties. Even Jessica clapped with genuine happiness, despite the clear confusion on her face about the timeline. But Miranda sat frozen in her chair, staring at the ultrasound images like they were evidence of some cosmic betrayal. I watched the moment the full weight of it hit her, not just that Harper and I were married, but that we were building the exact future she'd thrown away. The family she said she didn't want until someone else had it instead. "You planned this," Miranda said suddenly, her voice cutting through the celebration like a knife. "You planned all of this from the beginning." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at her. Harper closed the album, her face pale but resolute. "Miranda, I know this must be hard to hear, but Jake and I didn't even start dating until after his divorce was finalized." Miranda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. "You were feeding him information about me, turning him against me, manipulating everything so you could swoop in and steal my husband the second I showed any independence." Eleanor's expression shifted from confusion to the practiced steel she'd honed in 40 years of dealing with unstable people in family court. "Young lady," she said firmly, "you need to lower your voice and control yourself." "Control myself?" Miranda was shouting now. "This woman destroyed my marriage. She convinced Jake to leave me the second I made one decision about my own body, and now she's flaunting my life like some kind of trophy." Harper stood, trying to keep her dignity. "Miranda, you told Jake you were getting a hysterectomy to ensure you'd never have children. You ended your own marriage. You told me he'd never accept it, that he was too controlling, too traditional, that he'd leave you if you didn't want kids right away." Tears streaked with mascara ran down Miranda's face as she screamed, "You manipulated me into sabotaging my own relationship." "That was it. I finally spoke up. Miranda, Harper never told you to blindside me with a hysterectomy announcement. That was your choice, your decision, your strategy. You destroyed our marriage without discussion. She stole my entire future, Miranda shrieked, lunging across the table for the photo album like she could tear our happiness to pieces. Harper pulled it away, but Miranda managed to grab a few loose photographs and rip them in half before Eleanor's grandson Marcus restrained her. This should be my life. These should be my babies, Miranda sobbed, thrashing. She planned this for years, waiting for me to make one mistake so she could take everything I worked for. Chaos broke out as relatives tried to calm her, but Miranda was completely unhinged. Eleanor called the police when Miranda tried to physically attack Harper. It took 3 adults to hold her back as she shrieked accusations about stolen futures and planned betrayals. The last thing she screamed as Jessica dragged her out of the house was, "I never wanted that hysterectomy. It was all a test. You were supposed to fight for me." And suddenly everything clicked. Harper's family, initially stunned by our secret marriage and pregnancy, quickly rallied around us after witnessing Miranda's meltdown and hearing the full timeline from Eleanor's pointed questioning. Eleanor, with her decades of experience, recognized it immediately. That young woman is what we used to call a chaos agent. She creates crisis and conflict, then plays the victim when people respond rationally. I've seen it 1,000 times in custody cases. The contrast between families was stark. Harper's relatives processed the truth and supported us. Miranda's family, meanwhile, doubled down on her narrative. Her parents, both psychology professors at UC Boulder, enabled her by providing academic justifications for her behavior, labeling my departure as emotional abandonment, and painting Harper as a predatory woman who preyed on me during a vulnerable time. And Miranda didn't stop there. She began showing up at my construction sites, sometimes dragging her mother along, creating public scenes that embarrassed my crew and threatened my reputation. Carlos, my project foreman who'd worked with my father for decades, finally warned me, "Boss, that woman is going to cost you contracts." Mrs. Patterson asked me if you're safe to have around her grandkids after Miranda cornered her with a 40-minute monologue about your abuse. Meanwhile, Miranda escalated against Harper too. During a wedding shoot at the Denver Botanic Gardens, she somehow accessed Harper's camera equipment and vandalized thousands of dollars worth of gear, scratching lenses, smashing flashes. Harper lost the entire wedding contract, and the couple sued her for the ruined photographs. Harper stood in tears, staring at her destroyed livelihood. She's not just trying to hurt us emotionally anymore. She's trying to destroy our lives. Eleanor's response was swift. She used her legal connections to help Harper file restraining orders and alerted the hospital about Miranda's unstable behavior affecting her residency. "I've kept children away from parents less destructive than this," Eleanor told us grimly. "Miranda needs help, but more importantly, you need protection." Professional consequences followed quickly. Miranda's supervisor, Dr. Richard Hayes, called a meeting after receiving multiple complaints. She'd been caught using hospital computers to stalk Harper's social media, ranting to patients about her personal life, even missing procedures because she was too distracted by her vendetta. Ironically, Harper's business began to recover and thrive after the vandalism incident. The story spread through Denver's wedding industry, and other vendors rallied behind her. She got more referrals than ever, even from the very couple whose wedding had been ruined. They rehired her for their anniversary shoot after seeing how devastated she'd been. "It's like every time she tries to hurt us, it backfires," Harper said, staring at her suddenly full booking calendar. Eleanor also shut down Miranda's parents' academic gossip with a few phone calls, reminding them that unsubstantiated claims about private citizens, especially expectant parents, could be considered defamation. The final turning point came when Marcus, Miranda's own brother, witnessed one of her stalking episodes at my Boulder site. A law student who had been posting passive-aggressive takes about my character flaws, he finally called me. "Jake, I owe you an apology. I thought Miranda just needed support. But what I saw today, that wasn't my sister. That was someone who needs serious mental health intervention." With her own family beginning to acknowledge the truth, Miranda's harassment started losing momentum. But she wasn't done. The final revelation about her hysterectomy deception was still to come. Meanwhile, Harper and I focused on preparing for our twins. We built the nursery together, me in the workshop crafting a rocking chair and matching cribs out of reclaimed wood from my father's old projects, Harper editing photos beside me. Evenings passed in quiet companionship, both of us working on our crafts, building a future together in the way I'd always dreamed marriage should feel. The rocking chair was special. Every piece of wood carried memories of my father, who taught me that creating with your hands is love made tangible. And as I worked, I knew this was exactly the life Miranda had never wanted, yet one she couldn't stop trying to destroy. Harper documented the entire process with her camera, creating a visual record of how we were, literally and figuratively, constructing our family's future from the foundation up. "These babies are going to know exactly how much they were wanted," Harper said, resting her hand on her growing belly as she photographed me sanding the crib rails. "They'll see these pictures someday and understand that we built their first furniture with our own hands, that every detail was planned with love." Miranda's attempts to reconcile and reclaim what she now called her rightful place in my life failed spectacularly when she finally realized that Harper was everything she'd only pretended to be. While Miranda had played the role of a supportive wife who supposedly shared my dreams of family and legacy, Harper genuinely embraced those values as her own. Miranda had always treated my woodworking hobby as nothing more than a quaint distraction from what she believed were more important pursuits. But Harper saw it as an extension of my character. She encouraged me to share it, even pushing me to teach neighborhood kids basic carpentry skills in our garage workshop. That contrast became painfully obvious during Miranda's final desperate attempt to win me back. She showed up at our Boulder condo one Tuesday evening in September. Harper, 8 months pregnant, was on the couch editing photos while I put finishing touches on the second crib. Miranda looked healthier than she had at Easter. She'd clearly been working with a therapist and had gained back some of the weight she'd lost during her breakdown. But there was still something hollow in her expression, like she was only going through the motions of recovery without actually healing. "Jake, I need to tell you the truth about everything," she said when I answered the door, refusing Harper's polite offer to give us privacy. "The hysterectomy was never real. I never scheduled any surgery. It was all a test, to see how much you really loved me, how hard you'd fight to keep our marriage together." Harper looked up from her laptop, her expression shifting from polite concern to dawning understanding. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as the implications became clear. "A test," I said slowly. "You destroyed our marriage with a fake medical procedure to test my devotion?" "I know it sounds crazy now," Miranda insisted, her voice quickening. "But my therapist at the time said couples need to challenge each other, that comfortable relationships become stagnant. She suggested I create a scenario that would force you to prove your commitment beyond just going through the motions of planning our future." Miranda's voice grew stronger as she spoke, almost like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "I thought you'd fight for us, prove. You loved me enough to work through anything. Instead, you just left." Harper stood up carefully, her pregnancy making quick movements difficult, and walked to my side. "Miranda," she said firmly, "you lied to your husband about never wanting children and then blamed him for believing you. That's not testing commitment. That's emotional abuse." "You don't understand," Miranda snapped, her composure cracking. "Jake and I had something real, something you could never compete with. Honestly, you had to wait for me to make one mistake, one moment of weakness so you could swoop in and steal my life. I looked at the woman I had once planned to spend forever with, and for the first time I saw her clearly." "Miranda, you didn't make one mistake," I said quietly but firmly. "You spent months planning to deceive me in the cruelest way possible, then blamed me for responding exactly how any rational person would. That's not weakness. That's who you are." The visit ended with Miranda crying on our front porch, begging me to remember what we'd once meant to each other, promising she'd changed and learned from her mistakes. But Harper and I both understood the truth. Miranda's version of change only meant finding better ways to manipulate situations, not actually developing empathy or integrity. 6 weeks later, Harper gave birth to healthy twins, Emma and Michael, and my workshop finally became the place I'd always dreamed it would be. As the babies grew into toddlers, our garage filled with neighborhood kids every Saturday morning. I taught them basic woodworking skills, and Emma and Michael would toddle around the workspace in tiny safety goggles, handing me sandpaper and soaking up the atmosphere of creation and learning I'd always envisioned sharing with my children. Harper documented everything with her camera, their first steps taken between workbenches, tiny hands holding junior hammers, the proud smiles when kids finished their first birdhouse or pencil holder. Her photography business evolved into something special. She began specializing in family documentation, creating visual legacies for other parents who, like us, understood the importance of preserving those fleeting moments when children still believe their parents can build anything. Miranda eventually moved to California for a fresh start, accepting a residency at UCSF where nobody knew about her breakdown or the chaos she'd caused in Denver. Through mutual friends, I later heard she'd married another doctor within 2 years, a man wealthy enough to support the lifestyle she always wanted, but too busy with his own career to notice her manipulative tendencies, at least not right away. Sometimes from our kitchen window, I'd catch sight of her old apartment building across town, now home to a young couple with a baby stroller parked outside. Every once in a while, Harper would notice me looking and gently remind me that curiosity about someone's current life wasn't the same thing as missing them or regretting the choices that led us to our happiness. "She gave you the greatest gift imaginable," Harper said one evening as we watched Emma and Michael help me organize tools in the workshop. "She showed you exactly who she was before you wasted more years trying to build a future with someone who didn't actually want to build anything at all."